former Delta Captain Curt Taylor is going to describe his experience flying across the world, becoming a commercial pilot, the lifestyle, and a whole lot more. Let me welcome Sam, president of the EAA Chapter 20, to give an introduction of our group.
Hey guys, thanks all for coming. Just want to remind everybody the speaker series is just one of the many activities EAA 20 is doing to promote aviation in the Bay Area. So in addition to this, we are active in engaging youth through our Young Eagles program, where we take them on introductory flights around the Bay Area. If interested in building airplanes can join our future build activities. I say future because we just finished the RV-12. And people are just interested in aviation. Just, come join our social and talk about airplanes. We're doing that after our general meeting today. It's volunteers like Anand that really allow us to do so much at EAA 20. And we're always interested in people who want to give back to the community with interesting activities. So if you're interested in finding out more about our activities as well as for volunteering, just please reach out to us at info@eaa20.org. So that's my little plug. Back to you, Anand.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Now let's dig right into the presentation. Welcome, Curt. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thanks for inviting me, and welcome, everybody. Thanks for dropping in today. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experience, how I got to be an airline pilot, and talk about ways that for any of you who are interested in becoming an airline pilot, how you might do it. Of course, things have changed a bit in the 40 years since I was looking for an airline job, but and particularly now with COVID, the landscape has changed dramatically. But I think once we get past this, the future is going to be very bright. So for a lot of you people who are teenagers now, it's going to be a great career because there's still a lot of pilots retiring. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity out there for those who want to become airline pilots. And also, even if you don't want to be an airline pilot, there's plenty of other flying jobs to be had as well. So I will launch into the presentation here. So what we're going to do is begin with the end. And what I'm going to do is show you a little 5-minute clip of my last flight, just to give you a sense of what things are like in a 777 cockpit.
Los Angeles Tower Delta 40 Heavy, distance 900. Delta 40 Heavy, Los Angeles Tower, good morning. Wind 060 at 5. Runway 25 left, clear land. Clear land, 25 left, Delta 40.
Clear land, okay, let's go. Gear down.
Down.
2500.
326, looks like they're getting ready at your gate. Let me know when you're ready for taxi.
Times 25.
I've got 326 ready at taxi. So 326, right underneath the uniform. Drop number 25 right, contact now 0.75.
And flaps to the
Uniform across your guard right, over around 0.75, 326. Yeah, 723, call the EJet. Drop number 25 right, contact now 0.75. Call the EJet, clear across 25 right, at 0.7.
1000.
Clear to land. Just consent.
Runway's in sight. All right, here we go.
500. Approaching minimums. Minimums. $100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Oh yeah. Yeah, baby. Yeah, I'll get right through. Get over.
travel.
All right, guys.
We're proud and cheery.
We'll take that.
Yes, we will.
We'll take it.
Well done, Captain.
Thanks for keeping the old guy out of trouble.
Well done.
About 5 minutes. Delta 40 heavy clear 25 right.
Delta 40 Heavy, LA ground, taxi straight ahead on Tango, hold short at Delta.
Go ahead, Tango short Delta 4 drive.
Delta 40 Heavy, Los Angeles Air Traffic Control Tower wants to say congratulations to Captain Curt Taylor on your retirement and joy. And thanks for all your years of service.
Hey, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you all.
Delta 40 Heavy, thank you. Contact ground now 127.85.
Operations also says congratulations, and it's gate 133 still.
All right, thanks.
And the gate's open and available. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Whoa, baby. It is all coming in.
PL40 from R2. Go ahead.
Oh, look.
PL40 from R2. PL40, go ahead.
Slow down, Curt.
Hey, we'd like to congratulate Captain Curt Taylor for over 39 years of service. We know that you'll fly with your wife, Christine, and your daughter, Kay. We wish you a happy retirement.
Hey, thank you so much. You guys are awesome.
Holy crap.
Wow. That was quite a salute.
Are we in the hole here?
No.
Okay.
It's a Delta gate. Wow, that's awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen from Flight Deck, just wanted to point out, for those of you on the right side of the aircraft, we have one of the airport vehicles with the lights flashing and the water cannon held in salute for our retiring Captain Curt Taylor today. Everyone from air traffic control has passed along their congratulations, and feel free to.
You can take down the left side.
Left side's coming.
All right, great. All right. Everybody there?
Very cool video.
Could you guys hear that all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right. Well, I couldn't have asked for a better end, and so that's what it looked like. And I got to have my wife and 2 daughters on board my retirement flight coming in from Sydney. So it was a fabulous event. And anyway, let's move on. And let's see if get this set right. Okay. So anyway, let's talk about the paths to an airline job. And there's basically 2 paths. And one is the civilian route, which is what I took. And the pluses of going civilian is that you are available when the airlines are hiring, because hiring is somewhat cyclical. Airlines, go up and they go down. And so the trick is to be available when they are actually hiring. Also, it's having a familiarity with civil aviation, because that's the environment that you're going to be operating in. The downside of civilian, it's obviously more expensive. You got to pay for your own flight training, and you miss out on an opportunity to get some great military training and fly some really cool airplanes. For those who choose to do the military route, the pluses are great training, cool airplanes, less expensive because Uncle Sam is paying for your training. The downside, though, is that you have an 8 to 10 year commitment after you get your wings. So you're going to be stuck military, in whatever service you're in. And so if the airline doors open and close during that time, then that's just the way it is. And that's ultimately what informed my desire to go civilian. I had toyed with the idea of getting into Navy ROTC when I was in college, but I decided it was more important to be flexible and available when the airlines were hiring, and that strategy worked out for me, thankfully. So if you do go the civilian route, you've got to think about how you're going to build time to make yourself attractive to the airlines. And there are not too many ways to do that. For me, it was becoming a flight instructor. So I went to San Jose State, got my CFI when I was there, CFII, instrument instructor. So I was actually flight instructing while I was still in college. Other ways, you could tow banners, you can fly freight. I did that as well. And you can do corporate flying. But basically, you're going to need to get on with an airline, you need to have an ATP, Airline Transport rating, and you need 1,500 hours to get that, unless you get an ATP-R, and that is anywhere from 750 to 1,250 hours, depending on your education and experience. So these are the three most important things about getting on with an airline, and all of them involve seniority. Everything in the airline revolves around seniority. So the equipment you fly, the trips and destinations you fly, your days off, your vacation, your pay, everything revolves around that. So the sooner you get on with the airline, the better off you are, particularly if you get on the beginning of a hiring cycle, and then you get a lot of people below you, and you'll advance a little, well, actually much quicker. So lifestyle-wise, airline flying is unusual from any other sort of career, in that you live by the month, for most airlines anyway. So you bid your schedule each month, and that has its pluses and minuses. So bidding, only knowing a month ahead makes it hard to plan if you want to plan other things. Your vacation you will bid usually for the whole year. We bid in January for the vacation year beginning April 1st. It goes through April 1st through the end of March. So you would know when you can make plans for vacations, make reservations and things like that. But otherwise, you're bidding month by month for your regular flying schedule. Other things to consider: your base. I commuted my whole career, and the farthest I had to commute was from here, San Francisco, to Atlanta. I did that for quite a few years. So that adds a little more stress to getting to work. I thought how great it would be to live in my base, but unfortunately, well, I had a priority of living here in the Bay Area, and unfortunately, Delta did not have a pilot base here in San Francisco. So I commuted all my career to places like Seattle, Salt Lake City, LA, and Atlanta. Another thing to consider is your time off. Domestic pilots have less time off than international pilots. And that's why I chose to, after I got a taste of international flying, I chose to stick with that, because it's much more efficient. You get paid by the hour. And so on international flying, where you have long legs, it's much more efficient. So you would get maybe 30 hours in 3 days, where it would take you 4 or 5 days to do that domestically. So as a result, you get more time off, more days off. Pay these days, starting with a regional carrier, and regional airlines are the common stepping stone to the major airlines these days. So at a regional like SkyWest, starting pay is approximately $50,000. Regional captain will make about $120,000 a year. Once you get to the majors, first officer be 100 to 150,000, and international captain can be making 300,000 plus. Vacation-wise, you will get anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks a year, depending on how many years you've been with the airline. So this is where it started for me, Palo Alto Airport, and learning to fly in the Cessna 150. I soloed on April Fool's Day of 1970. And so this will take a little romp through my career path just to give you an idea of what worked for me. So started over here, got my private pilot's license while I was in high school. I went to school at San Jose State, got a degree in aeronautical operations with a business minor, which ended up coming in handy later on. I got my instrument commercial and CFI while I was at San Jose State at various FBOs around the airport there. I worked as a flight instructor while I was at San Jose State, and for about a year after graduation, I got my multi during that time. And once I had sort of burned out on flight instructing, decided I wanted to actually fly myself. So I got a job flying single engine Cessnas, flying, I don't know if anybody remembers photomats, but we flew film when people used film in cameras. So we'd fly the exposed film to the processing plants down in Southern California and up in Seattle. And then eventually moved into flying twin engine air commanders for a subcontractor to FedEx. And that was great time. That's where I got my multi-engine time. And then that company fell on hard times, as many others have. So then I went to work for another FBO flying passenger charters and single and multi-engine airplanes. And then came that glorious day in March of '79 when I got hired by Western Airlines, which was my dream job. And I had to pinch myself several times that I'd actually made it. Well, it wasn't long-lived. About a year and a half later, the airlines hit a huge downturn, and so I was furloughed, laid off in October of 1980. So went back to flying freight and single and multi-engine airplanes. Did that for about a year, and then I started freelancing as a co-pilot in a Layer 35 and pilot services for other corporate airplanes. And then a friend of mine and I started a 135 charter and aircraft management company, and that was called Barbary Coast Airways. I'm sure you've all heard of that. That was out of San Jose Airport, and so we managed a couple of Senecas, Cessna 421, a couple Turbo Commanders. So they would pay us a management fee, and then we had it. We would charter them out and pay the owners an hourly fee for that. And then eventually I got hired as a full-time pilot on actually it was a Lear 36, not a Lear 35 Cessna Citation for a company in San Jose. And then ran Barbary Coast on the side. And then thankfully got recalled to Western Airlines in December of '85. And in April of '87, Delta and Western merged. And so then I went through the ranks at Delta and eventually retired in August of 2018 as a 777 captain. And then this is sort of how my progression worked. I started as a 737 second officer, went to 727 flight engineer, and then a 737 first officer. Back in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, the airline union, Airline Pilots Association, wasn't quite comfortable with the idea of only 2 guys in a cockpit because most of the airplanes had flight engineers. So on the 737, the second officer would sit on the jump seat and pass coffee, basically, to the pilots, and run the checklists and things like that. So a couple of years later, they eliminated that position, and it went to a 2-man airplane. Anyway, Delta 737 first officer, and then went to the 757, 767 first officer. That was in Salt Lake City, and then LA, and then MD-11 first officer in Portland. That's where I got my taste of international flying, and found that I really loved it. And then that's about when I did that for 3 years, and right at the sort of end of that period was when 9/11 occurred, and things changed significantly at all airlines. But then it was they eliminated the Portland base where I was flying out of. So then I decided it was time to jump to the captain's seat. So I became a captain on the 737-800. Went from there to the 757, 767, and then 767 ER International, based in Atlanta. And then my final airplane went to the 777. So these are just some of the airplanes that I flew. 737-200 at Western, MD-11, 737-800, Boeing 767. I don't have a 757 picture. And then this is my last airplane, the 777. We flew the LRs and the ERs, 777-200s. And then that's my office, my former office on the LR. That's the view from my office. Pretty spectacular, isn't it? That's actually flying over Alaska on our way to Asia. That's my bedroom. We actually had a crew rest facility. So for the long flights, anything over 12 hours, we'd have to have crew rest. So there's two bunks here and 2 seats. So we would rotate every 3 hours or so. So there would be 4 pilots, 2 crews, and so we every 3 hours rotate and go up, take a nap. So it was pretty cool. And then I'll just give you a brief idea of how what some of the layovers we had. So flying international, we flew to Dubai in the Middle East. This is the Burj Khalifa. I've been up there. It's an amazing view. Tallest building in the world. And Singapore, this is the Marina Sands. We flew to Singapore out of Tokyo. And Sydney, flew there a lot. These days I'm hearing that my friends who are still there flying the 777, in fact, this is the last month that Delta is flying 777s, sadly. They're getting rid of them. But due to COVID, they have to remain in their hotel rooms for 48 hours, cannot leave the hotel room. So the hotel is around here somewhere. So that's sad for them. I flew to Johannesburg out of Atlanta in South Africa. Got to go visit the lion park and play with lion cubs. Tel Aviv, had layovers there. Got to go to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and tour around. And Dakar, Senegal. This is when we used to fly sort of 2 legs to Johannesburg. We'd fly from Atlanta to Dakar, which is on the west coast of Africa, lay over there, and then this is on the 767 ER. And then next day we'd fly from Dakar to Johannesburg. Rome, that was on the ER. So that's an idea of sort of what the some of the layovers we had. resources for those of you who are interested in pursuing airline pilot career. These are some things you might want to take a snapshot of this screen. I found the Future and Active Pilot Advisors, FAPA, it used to be called Future Airline Pilots Association. Now they call it Future and Active Pilot Advisors. They've got some great information there about becoming airline pilots. So of all the places I looked at, that I thought was the most informative. Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, they've got a campus in Prescott, Arizona, as well as in Florida, where you can go in there. It's all sort of pilot oriented, and you can get flight instruction there as well as taking regular university level courses. University of North Dakota is another big aviation oriented college, but there's lots of them. And if you go to the FAPA site, it'll show you a whole list by state of aeronautical schools. That brings us to questions.
Curt, great presentation. It was fascinating to learn about your experience as a commercial pilot and also becoming a commercial pilot. Now it's time for some Q&A. Please put your questions in the chat box. Also, if you haven't put your email in the chat, please do so now. For those of you who joined us late, EAA Chapter 20's Young Aviators aims at unleashing students' passion in the fields of aviation and aerospace. We welcome teams who are interested in aviation and aerospace to join Young Aviators. Please help spread the word. Now let's take our first question. I saw the iPad in the window. Kind of crazy that you still use that with all the Airbus systems at your disposal. What software are you running?
We were using, actually, we eventually went to ForeFlight, but we were using Jepson. We were using the Jepson program initially. And then I think after I left, we migrated to ForeFlight. So yeah, I think we were still using Jepson on the iPads. And before the iPads, we were using the Surface tablets, which were sort of a disaster. But most carriers were using iPads, and eventually Delta migrated to the iPad. But I use ForeFlight now in my 182, and it's great. I love it.
Yeah. Can you describe the differences between international and domestic flying?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, international flying is more efficient, so it gives you more days off. Domestic flying gives you more landings. One of the issues we would run into in international flying, you have to have 3 takeoffs and landings every 90 days. And sometimes it was hard to get that. When you've got 4 pilots and only 2 legs, 2 guys aren't going to get a landing, a takeoff and landing. So it was a continual struggle to try to stay current. That's not a problem for domestic because you're doing several landings in a trip. And your trips would be anywhere from 1 day to 4-day trips. So you'd get lots of landings, so currency. So and it's a great way, better way to stay current on your stick and rudder skills as well.
Was there any hesitation on becoming a captain?
No. It was time. I'd been there for quite a while, and the only thing, I could have become a captain sooner, but I wanted to wait until I had more seniority. If you're sort of in the low end of the seniority for a given category, then you don't get your pick of flying days or layover destinations. So I wanted to be relatively senior. Also, there was the risk of falling into reserve. Every category has to have reserve pilots to step in, say somebody gets sick. And if you're on reserve, you sort of have to stick around and be ready for a call. They have short call and long call. And obviously, being a commuter, I didn't want to have to go sit in Atlanta for days at a time. So I wanted to be senior enough to avoid reserve. I've tried very hard to stay off reserve.
Can you advise on the steps to become a commercial pilot? Any advice?
Well, yeah. I mean, the slides you saw were ways to become a commercial pilot. But starting with your private pilot license, just start and accumulating hours. That's the big thing. You want to have as many hours as you can. The more hours, the more attractive you're going to look to an airline. So again, if you want to go the military route, I would advise getting involved in Navy or Navy or Air Force ROTC at the university, and then that gets you sort of started on your military career. And they'll do some training while you're still in college, or at least give you some familiarization flights. And then if you want to go civilian, it's just all about finding a way to build time. And obviously, it's going to be more expensive if you have to pay for your time. So that's why most people become flight instructors, where you start getting paid for flying instead of. And it's sort of ironic that you're as a fairly new pilot, you're teaching others. I mean, I only had, I think, 250 hours when I became a flight instructor, and it seems a little crazy to me to be teaching people when I had so little time. But that's just the way it worked.
Yeah. What motivated you to become a commercial pilot?
I didn't want to work for a living. No, I'm just kidding. I had an uncle. Actually, my dad's cousin was a captain for Western, and so Western was my first choice of airlines to work for. And had another friend who was a Pan Am captain, and I just really thought it was a cool thing. And so when I was in high school, that's sort of when I decided I wanted to become an airline pilot. So I got a job working in a hardware store to earn money for flying lessons, and got my private pilot license the day after I turned 17.
Does it ever get boring on your long haul flights? How do you pass time?
Yeah, there's a lot of hours where you're not doing much, and now so many things are automated. It used to be you had to make position reports on the radio, so there was always something to do. But now it's all it's all now pretty automated. So we spend a lot of time talking to each other.
For those of who are teens, can you break down the steps?
The steps to
towards a commercial pilot license.
Well, yeah, and I think Oliver, you gave a presentation about getting your private pilot license recently, but that's the first step, is getting your private pilot license. And there's a number of places you can do that locally. With COVID, it's been a little more difficult, but I'm not quite sure. Different flight schools are doing different things in terms of how they deal with the pandemic. But once that passes, then we'll be hopefully moving towards a more normal lifestyle. But getting your private pilot license, and then your commercial and instrument, and then eventually you're going to need to get to your multi-engine rating, and the airlines are going to want to see something other than just Cessna 172 time on your resume. So the more advanced aircraft time you can get, the better off you'll be. So it's a matter of just finding jobs that you can do flying. Like I say, flight instructor is one of the initial stepping stones. And the regional airlines have been really hurting for pilots lately. So you can be a fairly low time pilot and get on with a regional, and maybe if there's anybody in the audience who is a regional pilot, they can chime in and add to that. I mean, it's been 40 years since I got hired, so the landscape has changed quite a bit. We didn't have the proliferation of regional airlines like we do these days. So that's how a lot of people, and a lot fewer guys are coming out of the military. So more, I think I saw something like 33% of the pilots hired now are out of the military, and the vast majority are coming out of regionals.
When you
Go ahead.
Now, when you had your last landing, did firefighters use water cannons to spray your plane with water?
I wish they had, but at LAX where I landed, they had stopped doing the water cannon. Initially, it was because of the drought. They didn't want to expend the water, and although by then the drought had ended, so they had some other reason. But it used to be that they would give you sort of they'd get a truck on either side of the airplane and fire the water cannon up off over your airplane, like you go through the car wash. And it was pretty cool. But now they just extend the snorkel and salute you. Other airports may still do it, but LAX not so much.
What kind of bachelor's degree do you need to become a commercial pilot?
Well, they don't really require any specific bachelor's degree. They just want you to have a bachelor's degree to show that you have the ability to learn. I had a bachelor's in aeronautical operations, and as I mentioned, I had a minor in business, which came in handy when I started my my company when I was furloughed. But initially I thought, a good technical degree would be good. In fact, I started off in mechanical engineering and then decided maybe that's not the best way to go. I was at University of Colorado, so then I transferred to San Jose State and went to got into the aeronautics program because that was more in line with my career aspirations.
What kind of financial aid was available to you to become a commercial pilot?
My parents. I didn't really have to seek financial aid because by going in state, I was saving a lot of money to which, so I had a college fund, so I was able to use that for my ratings and licenses. So instead, I was saving a lot of money not going out of state college. These days, like there's the Ray Foundation through EAA and AOPA as well. And so that's something you can talk to Oliver or Sam about if you're interested in financial aid. And other than that, I'm not too up on what else is available in terms of aid.
Yeah. I was wondering why you chose Delta versus the other airlines.
Well, initially I chose Western. The ironic thing is my very first airline interview was with Delta, and they didn't hire me, but Western did. But Delta got me in the end anyway. So, but Delta was a great company to work for, and so I have no regrets about that. The fact that we merged, and I had a great career, and have no regrets whatsoever. And and it's hard. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. Some carriers seem like they're going to be very strong, like Pan Am was very strong, and then they hit on hard times and went away. Pan Am, Braniff, just a number of airlines that didn't make it. And the hard part is when you do, if you're unfortunate enough to be in an airline that goes out of business, then you've got to start at the bottom of the list elsewhere. So that's a hard thing to do.
I think your job is cool. Did you ever get to eat food?
Yeah, they fed me. Well, particularly on the international flights, our contract required them to feed us. Domestic, not so much. It had to be a pretty long flight in order to be provided a crew meal. So it was eating the same food that everybody else eats in airport terminals. And but on the international flight, we would get the same stuff that they were serving in first class, or in our case, business elite, now Delta One. But yeah, so the food was great.
Yeah. How is flying now different from a decade back?
A decade back, well, you know, it's gotten more technologically advanced. We had this thing called CPDLC. It's a controller pilot data link, and so we could send information. It was like texting to the controllers, so we could ask for if we needed altitude changes. You know, this is mostly over water where there wasn't any radar coverage. But I think pretty much most people are using CPDLC now, so it's going more towards that kind of communication. The huge change was after 9/11. I mean, that just changed things for everybody. You know, where we got the hardened cockpit doors, and you know, we couldn't let people come into the cockpit in flight anymore, and security just became a big thing. So that's how things changed. And the other thing that's changed too is training. We noticed, and Oliver might vouch for this. The airlines, in an effort to save money, would go to. It used to be that we would go into the schoolhouse at the airline and sit for 2 weeks, and somebody would lecture us about systems. When we're moving to a new airplane, they'd tell us about systems, and then you go into the simulator and you have to take an oral or computer exam on systems. Now they send you a thumb drive and they say, "Here, learn this, and then when you show up in the schoolhouse, we're going to test you." So I think the training has taken a hit over the last few years. They call it distance learning, and so you guys now are learning distance learning during COVID, and at least you might get to see your teachers. We didn't have any teachers to ask questions to, so yeah, they've just tried to cut down on the training footprint that way.
Can you talk about maintaining situational awareness?
Yes, maintaining situational awareness is a good thing. Paying attention and not getting distracted by reading newspapers or checking your emails, things like that. Yeah, I mean, the airlines are pretty. They did not want us doing anything that would distract us, and during the course of our duties. So it's important to maintain situational awareness and also create an environment in the cockpit. This is part of CRM, crew resource management, where everybody feels free to speak up if they see something they don't like. And so that's something that I always try to encourage with my crews. Tell them, if there's anything you're uncomfortable with, don't hesitate to say something. We're all in this together.
What would happen if a plane caught on fire?
Oh, that's a bad thing. Fortunately, I never had to deal with that. It depends on whether it's on the ground or in the air. If you're in the air, you would, and depending on where the fire was, if it's an engine, you would pull the fire handle and attempt to extinguish the handle. We have a couple of fire bottles that will extinguish fires, and then you'd probably wind up doing an emergency descent, landing at the nearest suitable airport. If you're on the ground, then you just evacuate everybody off the airplane, depending on where you are. If you're out on the taxiway, you probably send people down the slides. If it's at the terminal and you have a fire, then you just get them up, as many out the jetway as you can.
Describe the non-technical interview process. What does it take to impress decision makers who know nothing about flying airplanes?
I wish I knew the secret to that. Well, it's like I said, it's been a long time since I went through an airline interview, and I think they want to see that you're dedicated, that you would be a loyal, hardworking employee, and but yeah, non-technical. Usually, you're being interviewed by pilots. Now, I did go through some interviews at different airlines where they weren't pilots, and I didn't get hired there. So maybe I said something that they didn't like. But I think the thing is, they want to know that you're motivated, and know something about the company. You know, do your due diligence and learn as much as you can about the company. And that's what I did with all the airlines that I interviewed with. I would do some research, and I would ask them questions or about, you know, some of their plans that I read about, but just showing some interest in that you really care, and you've done some research on them.
Were there any interesting flight stories?
You know, thankfully, I went through my career without having any real scary moments. I mean, there were things, yeah, you fly through some storms and lightning hits the airplane, or you know, a loud boom. You think it's so close it's hit the airplane. But yeah, no, thankfully it was a pretty quiet career. So my stories are mostly about some of the interesting people that would get on the airplane. And sometimes, particularly flying these long legs, like flying from Atlanta to Dubai or Atlanta to Joburg, where it's a 16-hour flight, and people would get on the airplane who did not look like they were in very good medical shape. So we would have to call the company that we contract with, who do aero medicine, and say, do you think this is a good idea if this person gets on and flies? And so we'd get their opinion on that. And sometimes we'd let them fly, and sometimes we say, sorry, you know, we just think this is not a good idea for you today.
What was the worst or scariest experience?
I'd say the scariest that I remember was coming out of Jackson Hole and having a small airplane come pretty close to us as we were going into Jackson Hole, and somebody had taken off there, and he passed pretty close to us. And this was before the days that we had TCAS, which is, you know, it shows us where the other airplanes are. And I had another one going into Lagos. That was pretty interesting. Lagos in Nigeria, and they had just gotten radar there, but they didn't quite know how to use it, and they kept us up very high. We kept asking for lower, and so we came in over the VOR, the radio navigation device, and we were way high. And but they were just totally overwhelmed. And so we attempted to get down, make the landing, but it just wasn't working. So we went around and came back again, and finally landed. But we heard from there was a Virgin Nigeria, and they were mostly British expats who were flying that. And what they would do is they would tell the controllers what they're going to do, as opposed to letting the controllers control them. But that I put Lagos on my no-fly list because just the layover there, we have an armed escort from the airport to the hotel, and we had to stay in the hotel compound and not go outside. And we did have some people who ventured outside to go get the cheaper beer, and they ended up getting mugged and robbed of their clothes. So they were standing outside the gate in their underwear. So yeah, it made it cheap beer not so cheap.
How would you handle a hydraulics failure?
By referring to the checklist. And we on the 777 we have an electronic checklist, so it actually comes up. But in fact, our whole checklist was electronic. So it takes you through all the steps you need to do to deal with whatever emergency or non-normal you're dealing with. So and hydraulic failure depends on the airplane. So it's hard to really say what you would do, but you just go through the checklist. And it's not something you try to do by memory.
Thank you for taking the time out, Curt, for a fascinating presentation. To everyone else, thank you all for joining. At the EAA, we have many opportunities available for people of all ages to avail. These include scholarships, building planes, and mentoring. Lastly, to keep updated with Young Aviators, follow our Instagram at YoungAviators1 and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have published all our past keynotes so you can view them at any time. And of course, please share with anyone interested. We're also excited to launch our College Talk series starting on October 24th. While students have got a glimpse of the latest innovation in their careers, and got an opportunity to ask questions directly to professionals about their passions, experiences, and pioneering works, we also want students to learn more about the college experience and have the opportunity to ask questions about learning aviation and aerospace in college. Our next keynote and Q&A session is on October 24th on Athena Chang's experience as a Stanford mechanical engineering student. Hope to see you there!